Greetings Lumen students, it's your Thursday video for week 8, and let's start with another spelling game. For this one I have 10 clues for you. These are picture clues. So I'm going to scroll through them pretty quickly, and you need to write down as fast as you can the word that goes along with this picture. Here's number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Number 9. Whoa, what just happened? And number 10. Yeah, let's work our way backwards. This is whale, W-A-I-L, and whale, W-H-A-L-E. Deer, D-E-E-R, and deer, D-E-A-R. Here's yoke, W-Y-O-L-K, and yoke, Y-O-K-E. Fairy, F-E-R-R-Y, and fairy, F-A-I-R-E. R-Y, sorry about that. Gorilla, G-U-E-R-I-L-L-A, and gorilla, G-O-R-I-L-L-A. Hey students, good job learning the difference between those homophones. You can take a spelling test on that if you would like to. We're going to just wrap up our use of pronouns with this fun book. It's called The Widow's Broom. It's by Chris Van Allsburg. And I want you to see how they're able to use this pronoun as kind of a way to trick their neighbors. Okay, so let me pull up the pictures for this. And good luck with your action items on pronouns this week, making sure that the pronouns are used correctly and that they match the verbs that are used with them. Witches' brooms, you want to see me. Witches' brooms don't last forever. They grow old, and even the best of them one day lose the power of flight. Fortunately, this does not happen in an instant. A witch can feel the strength slowly leaving her broom. The sudden bursts of energy that once carried her quickly into the sky become weak. Longer and longer running starts are needed for takeoff. Speedy brooms that in their youth outraced hawks are passed by slow-flying geese. When these things happen, a witch knows it's time to put her old broom aside and have a new one made. On very rare occasions, however, a broom can lose its power without warning and fall with its passenger to the earth below, which is just what happened one cold autumn night many years ago. Out of a moonlit sky, a dark-cloaked figure came spinning to the ground. The witch, along with her tired broom, landed beside a small white farmhouse, the home of a lonely widow named Minna Shaw. At daybreak, Widow Shaw discovered the witch lying in her vegetable garden. She was bruised and bloody and couldn't stand up on her own. In spite of her fear, and because she was a kind woman, Minna Shaw helped the witch aside and put her to bed. The witch asked Minna Shaw to draw the curtains, and then wrapped herself tightly in her black cape and fell soundly asleep. She lay there perfectly still all day and all evening, and when she finally awoke at midnight, her wounds were completely healed. She rose from the bed and moved silently through the widow's house. Minna Shaw was asleep in a chair by the fireplace, where embers of a dying fire glowed on the hearth. The witch knelt and took one of the red-hot coals in her hand. Outside, she made a fire of leaves and twigs and then dropped a strand of her hair into the flame. The fire hissed and crackled, burning with a brilliant blue light. Before long, the witch could see a dark form flying overhead. It was another witch who circled slowly and landed beside the fire. The two women spoke briefly, the first witch gesturing toward the garden where her old broom rested. And then they sat side by side on the second witch's broom and flew off over the treetops. When Minisha woke up, she wasn't surprised to find that her guest had gone. Witches she knew had unusual powers. It didn't surprise her either when she saw that the old broom had been left behind. The widow guessed it had lost its magic. It was an ordinary broom now, just like the one she kept in her kitchen. She began using it around the house and found that it was no better or worse than brooms she'd used before. But one morning, Minisha was still in bed when she heard a noise coming from the kitchen. She peeked in and saw something that made her heart jump. There was the broom sweeping the floor all by itself. It stopped for a moment and turned to the widow, then went back to work. At first, Minna was frightened, but the broom seemed harmless, and what's more, was doing a very good job. Unfortunately, it swept all day long. In the evening, to get some peace, she locked the broom in a closet. But when it tapped on the door for more than an hour, Minna felt guilty and let it out. As she lay in bed listening to the broom sweeping each room over and over, she wondered if it could learn to do other things. In the morning, she led the broom outside and found out that it was a very good student. She needed to show it how to do something only once. Soon the broom could chop wood and fetch water, feed the chickens, and bring the cows in from the pasture. It could even pick out simple tunes on the piano. Not a week passed before the widow's neighbors, the Spivies, found out about the broom. Their farm was just down the road, the only other place around. It was one of the 8 Spivey children who saw the broom first. When the boy told his father, Mr. Spivey ran straight across the road to the widow's house. "Is it true?" he demanded. Did she really have such a broom? "Oh, yes, I do," Minisha answered. "It's wonderful." She told her neighbor all about the broom and the witch who'd left it behind. Then she took him around to the back of the house, where the broom was hard at work splitting wood. Mr. Spivey was horrified. "This is wicked," he said. "This is of the devil." The broom stopped working and, still clutching the axe, hopped toward the widow and her neighbor. Mr. Spivey, red-faced with anger, quickly hurried home. Soon more distant neighbors heard about the broom and visited the widow's farm. The men who saw it seemed to agree it probably was a wicked thing, but their wives pointed out that it was a great help to the widow, and it could play the piano well, considering that it struck just one note at a time. No one's feelings were as strong as Mr. Spivey's. "It's evil and it's dangerous," he told everyone who would listen. "Well, I'll be sorry if this thing stays among us." As days went by, the broom seemed as innocent and hard-working as ever. Though it had learned how to do many things, sweeping brought it special pleasure. It was, after all, a broom. Occasionally, when there was nothing left to do around the widow's house, it would hop down the road that separated Minisha's and the Spivey's farm. The road was dirt, of course, and the broom could amuse itself there for hours. One afternoon, 2 of the Spivey boys and their dog walked along the road where the broom was happily at work. When they saw what it was doing, they kicked the small stones the broom had swept aside back into its path. The broom ignored them and shuffled off to sweep another part of the road. But the Spivey boys would not leave it alone. They called the broom names. When it continued to ignore them, they picked up a couple of sticks and started tapping the broom's handle. Finally, it stopped sweeping. The broom turned to the 2 boys and knocked them both on the head so hard they fell to the ground in tears. The broom huffed off, but the Spivey dog ran after it, yapping, biting at its bristles. "Get him!" the boys yelled. The little dog leaped into the air and caught the broom by the handle. But he was not there for long. That evening, Mr. Spivey drove his wagon up to the widow's farm. He was not alone. 3 men from the neighboring farms were in the wagon, along with a long wooden stake and coils of rope. Mr. Spivey knocked loudly. When she opened her door, Minna was frightened by what she saw. "We've come for the broom," her neighbor told her. "It's beaten my sons and likely done worse to my dog." The poor animal was nowhere to be found. The widow could tell by their faces that the men would not be leaving without her broom. There was nothing she could do to stop them. For a moment she stood silently and then answered, "Of course you're right. If it would do such a thing, we must get rid of it." She led the men into her kitchen. "It sleeps in here," she whispered, pointing to the closet. "If you move it carefully, it will not wake up." The men knew how strong the broom was, and they hoped the widow was right. They opened the closet door, revealing the slumbering broom. One of the farmers took it out and gently held it against the stake while the others wrapped it in yards of rope. They carried the broom outside, drove the stake into the ground, and gathered straw around it. Mr. Spivey lit the fire. In no time, flames turned the broom to ashes. Life soon returned to normal around the widow's farm. The Spiveys even found their dog, healthy but hungry, caught in the branches of a tall spruce tree. Then one morning, Minisha called on her neighbors with frightening news. She had seen the ghost of the broom. It was as white as snow and moved through the woods at night carrying an axe. Mr. Spivey did not believe her, but that night, under full moon, he watched from a window as the broom's white ghost came out of the woods and slowly circled his house. The next night it returned, circling closer and closer, and the night after it came again, tapping the axe lightly on the Spivey's door. The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Spivey packed their dearest possessions and 8 children into their wagon. Mr. Spivey tried to convince the widow to leave with them, but she chose to stay behind in her little farmhouse. She went down to the road as the wagon pulled away and waved goodbye to her neighbors. "You're a brave woman," Mr. Spivey called out. That evening, the widow fell asleep in her chair by the fire. She'd been listening to music, simple tunes played one note at a time on the piano. A gentle tap on the shoulder woke her. She looked up and smiled at the broom. Not a ghost at all, but still covered with the coat of white paint that she'd given it. "You play so nicely," Minisha said. The broom bowed, put a log on the fire, and played another tune. Hey, that story hinges on the mystery of the fact that it is a pronoun that's not very specific, is it? So we didn't know she'd had 2 brooms in the beginning. We'd kind of forgotten about that. And when she said it sleeps in the closet, if you go slowly, it won't wake up. Some of us, maybe you might have been, the first time I read it, I was confused. Hey, I thought she meant the widow's broom or the witch's broom that was in the closet. Well, there's a clue, right? Remember that she couldn't put that broom in the closet because it's constantly tapping on the door. It doesn't sleep, it doesn't rest, and has to sweep all night long. So that was the trick, is that she uses it. It sleeps in here, and they didn't know which broom she was referencing because that pronoun was not very specific. So kind of fun way to trip us up with pronoun usage in that story. I thought you would enjoy that. I want to just finish today with one last video that just reviews the 7 ancient wonders that we have learned about, and that I'd also like to hear about what wonders you think should be featured if we were to have 7 wonders of the modern world, ones that still exist today. What would be on your list, students? What would be the wonders that you think would make it today?
With a seemingly magical list of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Greeks who compiled the list found the number 7 mystically significant, perhaps because it was the number of the 5 known planets along with the sun and the moon. Historian Herodotus created one of the early lists. Later so did Antipater of Sidon and Philon of Byzantium. Each list, however, only reflected places in the Grecian world. They might have included structures like Stonehenge if they'd been aware of them, but that was beyond their horizons. Perhaps the most obvious object to be put on any Greek's list would have been the sculpture of Zeus, the king of their gods. The impressive 40-foot-high statue located at the center of worship in Olympia was finished in 435 BC and existed for nearly 900 years before it was destroyed by fire. Another obvious entry on any list had to be Egypt's Great Pyramid, Giza. It was already 2,000 years old at the time the lists were being made. A massive tomb at 480 feet high, over 146 meters, will remain the tallest man-made structure until the 14th century, and is the only member of the list of ancient wonders that still stands today. Perhaps the most beautiful of the wonders was the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Antipater wrote that compared to the other members of the list, when I saw the temple at Ephesus rising to the clouds, all these other wonders were put in the shade. The temple was finished in 323 BC and destroyed by invaders in the 3rd century AD. Competing with the temple of Artemis, the most beautiful wonder was the mausoleum of King Mausolus at Halicarnassus. His wife commissioned the best artists in the Greek world to fill it with beautiful sculptures. It was heavily damaged by an earthquake in the 13th century AD. No list would have been complete without the colossal statue of the god Helios built on the island of Rhodes in 292 BC. The bronze sculpture, as tall as our modern Statue of Liberty, only stood for a little over a half century before it was felled by an earthquake and never rebuilt. Perhaps the most mysterious of the places on the list was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Archaeologists have not been able to find the foundations of the gardens, and some historians think it may have actually been located 350 miles further north in the city of Nineveh. The royal gardens were built around 600 BC and were thought to have been destroyed by an earthquake in the 2nd century AD. On some early lists, Babylon also hosted another wonder with its walls, which were said to be hundreds of feet high and 56 miles in length. In 280 BC, however, work was completed on the Pharaoh's lighthouse at Alexandria, Egypt. This displaced the walls of Babylon as the 7th item. The 450-foot-tall lighthouse is the last addition to the list and considered the only wonder which actually had a practical function. The lighthouse was brought down by an earthquake in 1303 AD.
There we go. Kind of interesting. Let me show you someone else's list. So, it says different people have different items on the list. Here's one. Maybe these items made your list. And we'll end with this today. Having a hard time loading, I apologize. Maybe we won't. This was by the Travel Channel, and what they think should be the modern 7 wonders of the world. They include the Roman Colosseum. And there's the interior of the Colosseum. Machu Picchu. There's another view of Machu Picchu. Chichen Itza. And the pyramid there. There's another view of Chichen Itza. This is called the El Deir Monastery. And the Petra, in Petra, Jordan. Is that really cool? Built into the side of the wall. That's something I would really love to see. The Great Wall of China. Back to the wall, sorry about that. There's the wall again. The Taj Mahal. Christ the Redeemer statue. Backtracking on me. Okay, awesome. Thank you, students. It's been fun to explore those ancient wonders with you. I love history. So many fun topics to learn more about, to research. I hope you will choose something that you're interested in and research it more on your own. And we'll catch you next week. Thank you.